And we are live. Hello, everyone. This is your Right Geek, honorary Man King, and leader of the Awkward Cop Squad, here with number one Marmaduke fan to talk about Iron Man. How are you, number one Marmaduke fan?
I'm doing great. You've got old and new.
Old and new. Yep. So we're going to start first with the new. So this is issue number 6. And actually, this is not super new. This is actually came out on February 17th. We kind of were a little bit late in covering this one, but that's okay. It is what it is. All right, so issue number 6 basically starts right where issue number 5 left off, which I don't know how many people recall when we talked about issue 5 in our last stream. But it basically starts right at the moment that Korvac breaks Tony's neck. So he's basically lying on the floor, defeated, and this is actually an interesting way to open up the issue here, I think. And basically, the opening pages kind of establish for us exactly how Tony gets from the point where he's basically disabled and his neck is broken to the next part of the story. It actually shows us for once how you get from point A to point B. I know in previous issues we talked about how sometimes the next issue would start at some place that was like time had been fast forwarded, and wait, I feel like I missed something. And this one actually he did start right where they left off and actually kind of explained how you got from point A to point B. So that was an interesting change from earlier issues. We have here.
They're
I'm
also
done with
not
being
skipping
polite.
around big chunks of the story this time.
Yeah. I will say that that though I did appreciate that they didn't jump around and skip big chunks of the story. Occasionally, I thought that sometimes the writer didn't effectively use his real estate, because we'll talk about it when we get to some of the later scenes. But sometimes I felt some of the scenes were rushed, and then some of the scenes were a little bit too stretched out. Like, I thought that this opening point A to point B section probably could have been chopped down a little bit. I think it's essential that it was there. But at the same time, it took a little bit long for them to get to the point where they're in the cab racing to get Tony help here.
It's 3 pages,
what are your
right?
thoughts
And
on
so
that?
it emphasizes what a bad situation Tony is in. Like he's being
Yeah.
hauled around in a abandoned grocery store cart.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I was starting to get into it. So if it's true that it's a
Yeah.
little stretched out, I think it's
Mhm.
also true that it grabbed my attention at the beginning and held
Mhm.
it, because you know that Tony's like on his last legs. And over the course of this issue, we basically see Tony cowboy up, where in previous
Yeah.
issues I've thought he was a little simpy. In this, he's basically preparing to go into battle with a broken neck, basically with his armor
Yeah.
having him in traction. The supporting cast, they do some little quips about the situation they're in. It's not too bad.
Mhm.
I feel like Scarlet Spider, they're sort of writing him as like Brian Michael Bendis, goofy Spider-Man with the smart alecky quips
Yeah.
about their situation.
Yeah.
And there's also a neat
one thing
element of
here
there's like a
that,
power struggle between him and War Machine, where War Machine just wants to bring in all the cavalry and get the job done, and Tony's still trying to do this on the down low.
right, which that struck me as kind of weird, because if Rhodey has escaped, then the entire reason to do it on the down low doesn't make sense. Because the way that they argued it before, he was doing it on the down low because he did not want to inspire Korvac to kill Rhodey, right? But if
Right.
Rhodey has escaped, that whole reason for not bringing in the cavalry is now gone. So
Oops.
why, again, are we not? Yeah. So that was a little bit of a question mark. I wanted to highlight this part too, where he says no hospital. Patsy says you have to. Neck's broken, arm holding it together. Need a technician. I kind of responded to this like, right, because hospitals don't have technicians. Like that, hospitals don't have technicians that are good at putting you in traction.
He needs a Donatello. He needs a magical smart guy who does the technology part of the superhero.
Yeah. But like what's really going on here, in my opinion, is that if Tony actually did go to a hospital, the hospital say, well, obviously you can't go out and go superheroing because your neck is broken. And he doesn't want to hear that because, as you say in this issue, he is at the point now where he's done being polite. He's done letting people kick him around. And he actually wants to cowboy up and fight. And if that means he has to fight with a broken neck, then that's what he's going to do. What I thought was a little bit odd about this moment is that this is one of those times where Patsy being a nag and pointing out to Tony that, oh, well, you're really just doing this in order to satisfy your own pride. This is a point where it would actually make sense because him wanting to ignore his own profound injuries in order to finish this fight that he started is a moment of him basically giving into his pride. So it would make sense for the character who's supposed to be there to needle him about that, to actually needle him at this point. This is a point where he actually kind of deserves it, as opposed to all the other points where Patsy nagged him about that, where at the time he really didn't deserve getting carped on. In this case, he does, and Patsy, except for this kind of weak, but you have to, doesn't really become the nag that she was in early issues, which I thought, really? This is the time where he actually kind of deserves it, and you're not really going to say anything? Once again, doesn't quite make sense.
It would help if they would commit to a romance relationship for Iron Man, because I'm just kind of waiting for them to break up again to keep all the characters single. But, like there could be like a neat, tsundere. Feminist is the closest we have to tsundere in Western comics, but he's so strong, but he's so needy, right? Like he brings out her big sisterly instincts and makes her nag him because she loves him.
Yeah. Yeah, her big sister stuff. Yeah. Let's see.
We get a bit of action with
so we have here that Gargoyle here gets very seriously injured trying to protect everyone else. So he shielded everyone else.
His life force is essentially tied up to his magic.
Yeah. Right. So I wanted to point that out because there's a later scene where that becomes a plot point. So then we catch up again with what's going on with Korvac and his gang and what's going on with Rhodey. Rhodey, once again, has all the controller discs on his forehead. And we have Korvac's team getting ready to go to go look for Galactus's ship out in space. And hopefully the spinning wheel of death does not last forever. But this is one scene where I thought maybe the use of real estate wasn't quite right, because to me, Rhodey's escape here felt a little bit anticlimactic. Like I felt like it needed to be more earned.
He just ran away.
Him getting out of there. Yeah, he just kind of ran away and nothing happened. There wasn't like a big fight that he had to win in order to get out. So I thought, that's a little bit lame, I think. He got away too easily. All right, come on. Spinning wheel of death. Anyway, while the wheel is spinning, other thoughts that you have, Marmaduke? while we wait for the wheel
it's improving, and it's starting to get to the point where I could feel like, okay, I might actually start to enjoy these comics. I still want it to be more punchy and maybe a little lighter on the Josh Whedon style quip humor. I'm always thinking of like the Stan Lee comics, since that's what we're contrasting with.
Yeah, unfortunately, like that's kind of infected. That's infected the Iron Man comics for a long time. The Joss Whedon speak, and there are some other aspects of this that don't quite line up with the established character from earlier canon too, which I'm going to talk about once the wheel stops spinning. Well, anyway, later on in the issue, we first of all, we have the pages where we see basically the explanation of how they modify Tony's suit so that it basically keep him in traction while he's still in it and fighting, which was that was a bit of exposition that actually worked, because it was kind of essential to explain like how he's going to be able to keep going. And it actually had this this nice moment, if I could actually get it to come up. Well, it had the nice moment where they acknowledged Tony's addiction history when it. Hang on, maybe if I go into guided view, it'll.
He doesn't know what painkillers will do to him.
Yeah, he doesn't know what's going to happen if he. He doesn't know what the painkillers are going to do to him. And I said, okay, that's really nice, but that better, like, if you're going to bring that up, it'd be nice if you followed through with it. Otherwise, you're just a big tease. Like, like make that be a little bit important later if you possibly could, because it's, the good Iron Man comics, they will they'll put like the bottle of alcohol on the scene, and then you'll be like, oh, well, why is that there? Why is that gun hanging on the wall? And then they'll fulfill it, right? So, so I would like this to be the gun on the wall that gets fired later, if we could possibly. All right.
The theme of the overarching story has been getting Tony back to basics, which I feel like that's maybe like a meta thing where they like to get the Iron Man comics back to basics, which is a good. It's a noble goal. I don't know. So the little glimmers of hope I'm seeing is an emphasis on adventure, Tony manning up and dealing with these tough situations. Some little fun stuff with Tony interacting with maybe like lower tier superheroes. And Keifu is still consistently an excellent artist. I'd like to see just a little bit more variety to maybe like his camera angles, but I have a feeling that Keifu is going to be like a top level talent for years to come. So that it's always exciting getting a glimpse of that in comics like this. You can tell this is a master on the way up.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was saying in the pre-show that pretty much the reason why I'm buying this is for the art team, and not so much the writer at this point. The writer hasn't 100% sold me yet, but the art team is, for me, I respond to the art like a Philistine, and I say, ooh, so pretty. It's so pretty. I like it. I want to have it. I want to look at it.
Pretty pictures.
Pretty pictures. Yeah. So pretty pictures. I like, and I like how Keifu draws Tony. It is, I wasn't sold on the long hair for a short time, but then I was like, okay, I'm getting used to it now. And now I'm deciding that this is probably one of my favorite renditions that an artist has done of Tony, because again, pretty pictures. It's just so pretty. All right, so I gave up on Comixology. Here is the
Comixology quit on you? Ooh, hello, can you hear me?
Now without them. So like I said, I did like that. I did like that acknowledgement. But again, if we could not have that be the gun on the wall that never gets fired, that'd be even better.
It's a really important aspect.
Hi, can you hear me?
Of his history. Yes, okay. It's a really important aspect of his history. So if we're gonna go down that direction, like, you don't even have to go down the direction of having him like do hard liquor again or something, but just basically acknowledge that this is an ongoing struggle for an addict like Tony, where the temptation is always there, and he has to avoid taking that first step down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Okay. So we also have this part right here, which is a good example of what you were saying, Marm, about him cowboying up. This is basically the cowboy up page right here.
Yep.
Where he says, "I am alive. I am angry." Oops.
Korvac's a god. I'm Iron Man.
Yeah, I am Iron Man. He thinks I'm God. I am Iron Man. Yeah, but him, like, I'm done apologizing. You know, I'm ready to fight. Yeah. So, yes, that is one of the positives of this issue, as you say, is that we get away from the simping and kind of bring in a little more virility, yep. A little more willingness to fight and to defend himself. But there are there's one thing that that kind of bothered me.
I think you cut out a little bit there.
Gargoyle loses a wing. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. So Gargoyle loses a wing. He's basically on death's door. And it really bothered me that when they started discussing what they were going to do about Gargoyle, this is what Cantwell decided would be Tony's response. So Tony says, "We're leaving the planet inside of 2 hours. If he's out for the count, then he's a waste of my time," and we leave him. Now,
kind of the reason why that side.
Yeah, that is not how I have read Tony in the rest of his canon. I say here on the blog, it's good to see him angry and spoiling for a fight. However, I'm concerned that Cantwell is replacing his simp Tony with a callous Tony, who is also, in my opinion, out of character. So, my comment here was Tony doesn't see people as objects he can discard when they become inconvenient to his designs. That's not to imply that he doesn't manipulate or hold information back sometimes if he feels like he needs to in order to accomplish something that he feels needs to be accomplished. But he doesn't do so in a way that is that callous and uncaring of the people that he's working with. Even when you look at a storyline like, say, Civil War, which you could arguably say is him at his most manipulative and Machiavellian, even then, if you look at the portions of the Civil War event that focused on him specifically, you can see how much it tortures him to make those kinds of decisions. So what I said here on my blog is that the decision to leave Gargoyle behind would, on the contrary, be based on Tony's concern for the guy's well-being and would inspire a good bit of guilty agonizing over the role he might have played in the events that led to Gargoyle's injury. So he would never, ever say, just leave him, he's a waste of my time. That's not how Tony thinks. I mean, he might say we have to leave him because it's important that we get this guy before he gets a hold of this powerful ship that could make him essentially unbeatable. and he would be pragmatic in that way, but there would have to be some sort of narration or thought bubble or something where he says, but, oh God, I really hate that I have to do that.
He's a hard ass, but he's not heartless.
Yes, exactly. So what Campbell has to do is he has to get that balance right. He's got to be on that pivot between being the hard ass pragmatist and the guy with the guilt complexes that could sink aircraft carriers. They're both a part of that character. So you have to make sure that you're juggling both of them at the same time if you want to really get an accurate depiction of the character. So that part kind of pulled me out of the story a little bit. And then, yeah, as you said, there was the power struggle here between Rhodey and Tony, which, as we talked about, it kind of doesn't make sense now for Tony to be rejecting Rhodey's help, because Rhodey has escaped from Korvax, so the reason why he wanted to go on the down low to begin with is completely gone. So why not accept help? Yeah. So, that kind of brought up something else that sort of bothers me about this run is we have yet to see. What we see a lot of is Tony using just passion and brute force. And while that is not beyond him, he has he has defeated villains of brute force before. I clearly remember old issues where he'll even take off his gloves and be like, "Oh, okay, I'll fight you with my bare hands." I mean, he does that, but again, you're getting the passion, but you're not getting also the strategist and the inventor, which is the other side of the pivot. He's doing a lot of punching and, walking in on pure bravado and not doing a whole lot of thinking in the lab about, okay, this guy is getting is incredibly powerful and is getting more powerful by the second. How can I defeat him? Because conventional methods aren't going to do it. Let me spend 48 hours in the lab, thriving on coffee and no sleep, trying to figure this out. Where's that side of Tony? That side is missing. So there's no strategizing. He's just jumping in and fighting based on pure instinct instead of the thinking that we see in some of the older comics.
That's really poignant, because one of the issues we're going to talk about for Tales of Suspense deals with that topic specifically of doing brain work. Yeah, the brain is more important than the armor.
Yeah. So so my comment here was, it's Tony in the scene. Tony is high on pain meds and therefore probably not thinking straight, but it still feels like we're forgetting that Tony Stark is one of Earth's smartest men, or he's supposed to be. Yeah, he's defeated villains through good old-fashioned brute force before, but he's also an inventor and a strategist. Where is the lab sequence? Where is the planning? So I agree that as we get deeper into this run, the issues are getting better over time, and kind of pulling Tony out of the sort of simp hole that he was in at first. That's all good, but I feel there's still some distance that we have to go before we get to what I feel is the real Tony. That is the balance between the hard-nosed pragmatist and the guilty idealist. The Tony who's the balance between the guy with passions who gets driven by his anger, and also the guy who's the inventor and the strategist who thinks and uses his brain to get out of problems. we're not quite, we haven't quite achieved that integration that we need to achieve in order to really get a good sense of that character.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like a balancing
so that
issue.
That was my thoughts on issue 6. Is there any? Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Last thought is, I think that Cantwell recognizes these aspects of Tony Stark. Probably just what he needs to learn how to do is how to include them together in a story so they relate together. Well, I guess the closest thing I can think of is if you have a theme of a character having a flaw, you want that to be kind of like be front and center throughout the entire plot. You don't just want, Tony Stark is a jerk floating out there as like a random idea here and there. You want Tony Stark being a jerk, being like key enough to the story and what's happening that people say, okay, I can tell the writer is going somewhere with this. That it's a way of earning trust from the reader. You're saying, trust me, come along with me. I'll take you somewhere with this.
Okay, now let's see here. I can make Comixology work again. Because so now we're going to move on to the back to the old the AULD issues of Iron Man. If we can. Come on. Okay. Starting with, all right, so the first issue that I chose to discuss for this stream was Tales of Suspense number 47. And this is the first appearance of Melter, which those of you who have watched all of these videos on the new Iron Man run, you might recall that the Melter did show up earlier in this run too. But this is his very first appearance in Tales of Suspense. And what we discover here. All right, so it starts off with, oh no, military tanks are falling apart. What is the cause of this?
No beating around the bush whatsoever.
No beating, they just jump right into it. Yeah, one of these issues, I can't remember which one, actually starts with, let's dispense with all the setup and just jump right into it. Yeah, well, I mean, this one kind of says that too. Let's not waste time with long introductions. Let's just jump right into it. But there's another one that says it even more explicitly. We're not going to waste time with boring introductory scenes. We're just going to get right to the action. And I've always loved one of the reasons why I love Tales of Suspense so much, one of the many, many reasons, is the kind of attention deficit disorder it has, where they just jump right into the action, no explanation, because the boring parts are boring. We're just going to skip over all those parts and just jump right into it. Yeah, so they jump right into it here. Oh no, our tanks are falling apart. It looks like every joint has been melted. And this concerns famous young industrialist Anthony Stark, because he is the plant who built those tanks. And then that's when the Melter shows up. So they like literally were, which I love about these early comics. Again, no time wasting, just jump right into it.
There's also a neat...
and then this is where we find out that the origin of the Melter is that he is someone who was a business competitor of Tony's, that lost his contracts with the government because Tony pointed out that he was using substandard materials. Because Tony is supposed to represent the ethical capitalist who does things right. Yeah, damn Tony for being such an ethical and proper businessman. So he wants to get back at Tony, and he eventually hits upon this device that can melt iron. So, of course, that's going to be a big problem for Tony, the Iron Man. I must play
carefully.
It's kind of interesting how
it functions. It doesn't seem like it melts it with heat. It seems like it melts it just with pure into just like a pure liquid without even like burning or scalding Tony. That's one of the interesting aspects of it.
Yeah, that is a little bit interesting. Yeah, so we get to so he has knocked Tony out and melt some of his machinery, but he decides, I won't finish you off now. I want to play with you more. And then we get some nice, what my family calls junior high sex between Pepper and Happy here.
Yeah. And there's this implication that Happy loves
Pepper. Ever loved chauffeur, not a bloodhound. Yeah, Happy loves Pepper. Pepper loves Tony. We have this great Tales of Suspense has this great kind of love triangle going on. Actually, that love triangle goes pretty deep into volume 1 too. It's not always present, but when Pepper, Happy, and Tony are in the books, it does come up for at least until the 70s. This is an issue. Yeah, so Happy loves Pepper. Pepper loves Tony. Oh no, I must recharge. I tripped and fell. One other thing I love about Tales of Suspense is the lame excuses. Oh no, I tripped and fell.
But it underscores his extreme vulnerability.
Yeah, it does. Very much so, which is one of the reasons why I took to this character to begin with, is because of that aspect of vulnerability to him. But it is also funny. Oh no, should we call a doctor? No doctor. Which that kind of pulls an interesting parallel between this and the new issue where Tony's saying, no hospital, just get me to a technician. No doctor, just leave me alone. I just need to rest. And he locks them out and recharges.
Plugs his iPhone into the wall.
Yeah, plugs his chest into the wall. And yeah, so the chest plate, and I think I've mentioned this in lots of previous videos, the chest plate in the Tales of Suspense era bleeding into the beginning of Volume 1 is one of my favorite aspects of these early comics because, as you say, it does underscore it is a point of vulnerability for him. The chest plate does not stay powered forever. So when he runs out of battery power, essentially he has to find a socket somewhere. And I always connected that to my own personal experience with chronic illness and how when you have a chronic illness, you can run for a particular point in time, but then eventually you do have to stop and rest.
Yeah.
And it's not literally plugging a socket, plugging your cord into a socket, but it's figuratively that. So it's a nice way to get I feel it's a nice way to get the experience of disability and chronic illness across in a way that doesn't smack you over the head with a 2x4, but eventually he gets the energy back. Meanwhile, the Melter is still plotting. So the Melter gets into the power plant, and that sets off an alert that Tony sees. So he changes into his gold armor and goes to fight him. And basically what happens is when they have their confrontation, that could completely expose me and leave me defenseless. So essentially, he has to run away. So
it's interesting how they came up with a villain. We came up with a villain that specifically attacks the whole point of Iron Man. He's Iron Man. He's fighting a bad guy whose power is to melt iron.
Right. Is melting iron. Yeah. And can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Hello?
Hello. I hear you. Okay.
Okay. All right, good. Okay. Hey, Warzord is here. I just noticed. The Melter, they need to bring him back. Well, they actually did bring him back briefly in the Cantwell run.
Sort of as a secondary villain.
Yeah. Just someone that Tony roughs up in order to demonstrate that he's not exactly emotionally stable at this point in time. But yeah, so at this point, the Melter can only melt iron, so that becomes a plot point later. But what I like about this is the fact that this is a villain that targets Tony's strength specifically, and he has to run away in order to survive, which is great because one of the things that gets a reader invested in a particular conflict is if it isn't immediately apparent that the hero is going to win. So that's the great thing about that. He has to run away and hide, essentially, in order to survive. I've never faced such an enemy before. Who is he? Where did he get his power? And most important, how can I fight him when I dare not face him? So these transistor magnets should keep the Melter from reaching me now. I love the magnets in Tales of Suspense. That's another thing I love. Magnets are magic and do everything. So he basically breaks a pipe, then basically smoke bombs him so he can get away. Nothing more Iron Man can do without a battle plan. And here we get to basically the reason why I chose this issue to run counter to the new issue, and that is the fact that this issue emphasizes the brain aspect of Tony Stark, the inventor and the strategist who stops and thinks before he blunders into conflict. So cancel all appointments. I don't want to be disturbed for anything. So we get he disappears into his lab for the last sequence. What do I do now? Iron Man is helpless against an enemy with the ability to melt iron. Yeah, and bear in mind again that Iron Man was invented in Tales of Suspense number 39. So this is 47. So this is not long after he became a character, and they've already hit upon the idea of having him face an antagonist that exactly targets the one thing that makes Iron Man. So that's great. Face it, Stark, you're running scared. So we have this moment of self-doubt I don't dare confront the Melter again as Iron Man. If he should destroy my iron helmet, revealing my identity, Tony Stark would be prey for every criminal who wants revenge on Iron Man. So he had this fear. He's sweating. What am I going to do? But then he stops and he says, and this is probably one of my favorite panels from the entire Tales of Suspense era. And he says, "What's the matter with me? I'm still not helpless. I've still got the greatest weapon in the world, a human brain. The brain that created Iron Man should be able to invent a defense against the Melter." This right here is what I call a key panel, in the sense that if you're thinking about panels throughout the history of Iron Man as a character that really established the entire point of the character and who the character is, this is one of them. The fact that the armor is really just a manifestation of his actual genuine superpower, which is his intelligence, his ability to think his way, to invent his way out of tight spots. So and that's one of the things that, again, I still feel is missing in the newest run of Iron Man, is that acknowledgement of his intelligence and his ability to think his way out of tight spots. There's still a little too much emphasis on the brawn, the strength of the armor to shoot or punch his way out, and not a whole lot of it, and not a lot or any really emphasis on his ability. So that was kind of my ulterior motive in picking this issue, because this issue established beyond that one of the points of the character is the brain inside the armor. He's like Kryptonite Man to Superman. Yeah. Yeah. So Warzord says that the Melter is like Kryptonite Man to Superman. Yes. All right. Number one Marmaduke fan, are you still there? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, I can't, Marmaduke fan, I can't hear you. You might have to re-log in. All right, well, we try to get number one Marmaduke fan back so I can hear him. Okay. All right, so we have the brain that created Iron Man should be able to invent a defense against the Melter. So that right there was my ulterior motive in choosing this issue. I've got to find the answer no matter how long it takes. All right, so meanwhile, we have this panel right here, which basically implies that, well, it says, and so the many-talented Anthony Stark locks himself away from the outside world as normal life goes on without him. So there's an implication here that his period of thinking lasts a pretty good long while, to the point that people start to notice that he hasn't come out yet, including his dates, because Tony in Tales of Suspense has game back again. I just saw him pop in again. Hello, number one Marmaduke fan. Can you hear me? Hello? Are you there? Hmm. For some reason, we still can't hear number one Marmaduke fan, but apparently everyone can hear me. Warzord, can you hear me?
Boop, 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 boop. Boop, 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 boop. Hello, hello. Testing, testing, testing.
Oh, now I can hear you.
Yes, okay. You're doing
hello,
great.
Hello, now I can hear you.
I can hear you. Okay.
Yay,
yes,
okay.
I can hear you. Perfect.
All right, yay. All right,
okay.
So, yeah. Okay. So we have... So the many talented Anthony Stark locks himself away from the outside world, and we have a date showing up. But I had a date with him. No one stands up the most famous name in Hollywood.
That's a nice way of having to avoid saying what the most famous name in Hollywood is.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and here's more of that the great junior high sex here between Pepper and Happy. Put your eyes back in your head, Happy. I thought you were interested in beautiful girls. I'm not. I just like you. Well, look who's talking, the poor man's Bela Lugosi. I love that. I love that whole early relationship in general. I have a bunch of panels on my Iron Man blog that are like bonus panels. These aren't focused on Tony, but I just like them anyway because it's Pepper basically roasts Happy to death any chance she gets. It's really funny. I have one panel on my blog where Happy buys this really, really ugly like sport coat, and she just can't help but comment on, oh my god. So she's like, oh, I'm going blind. You're blinding me with that coat, you know. Yes. So great junior high sex there.
He's sort of a tough Irish
then he finally comes out.
Tony.
So basically, he was in there for a day because the next morning, yeah. So he comes out because apparently he's figured out how to defeat him. So then he goes off in his armor again to confront the Melter again. Well, actually, first he goes off to Washington D.C. because Washington D.C. wants to talk to him. I love the implication here that he's got like little safe houses all over the country where he can just pop in and change. You know, that's kind of great.
There's also a nice panel where two regular Joes see him driving and say, "Oh, that's the luckiest guy in the world. Got no care in the world." Like they do a really good job of, even if it's not the main plot of the story, they always emphasize that as a rich man, he has problems.
Yeah. That's this panel right here. And this is not the only issue that does that. They actually do that fairly routinely in these early comics where it's the writer's way to emphasize, it's the writer's way to be ironic in a sense. So they'll have like, Tony is racing off to Washington, D.C. because he's being called on the carpet for all of these tanks basically falling apart. And then, just some regular Joes on the street see him driving by or speeding by or whatever. They're like, oh, look. There in the world. Which it's a great way to kind of twist the knife. The richest guys around, but he does have problems. Even though regular people might not be able to recognize them. So here we have in Washington, I tell you, Stark, we can no longer tolerate these accidents, not when our national defense is involved. All this nonsense about a man you call the Melter is just balderdash. Do you think you're talking to children? So, the people that he works for as a defense contractor don't believe that that it is the Melter that has caused his production to fall off. So now it enhances his his desire to get this guy, because if not, then his entire business is in jeopardy. Which is, early on, we're already introducing another kind of common theme that pops up routinely in his canon, which is rivals threatening his business in some way or another, and him having to work a way out of it using his Iron Man identity. And then, oh no, he has to go back to the factory because the Melter has attacked again. And what happens here is that Pepper and Happy get involved. Because they don't know where Tony is, because Tony is right now busily changing into being Iron Man. So they get involved and they end up getting put in danger here as Tony and the Melter face off again. And then
also there's an element of the Melter seemingly clowning on Tony and making fun of how stupid he looks before Tony bounces back. And basically from that point on, he's got the Melter on the run, because his one trick, he can still use it to melt things around Tony, but his one trick was that he could directly attack Tony and melt his uniform. So it's really a fair fight from this point on, and Tony's got a handle on the situation.
Yeah, so, oh no, your armor, it isn't melting. And that's because at this point he can only melt iron. And Tony says that I've made an entirely new suit of armor that is made out of something else.
It's an elegant and simple solution to the problem. Like a kid could think of it, but it's actually it's actually like a really good switcheroo.
Right. So that's basically what he was spending all night doing in his lab, was switcherooing his armor so that he could make it a fair fight with the Melter. We have this nice little moment here where he rescues Happy and Pepper from being smacked by a falling piece of debris. And Pepper, all of a sudden happy that Walking Tin Can is the handsomest male I've ever seen. Ah, yes. When a man does something heroic, the women swoon. Because this comic exists in reality. And then, so now I gotta stay out of Iron Man's reach so I can figure out why my melting beam had no effect on him. Yeah, so now it's a fair fight. And then for the rest of the fight, the Melter does get away through the sewer, but at the very least, and then here's where we explain how he was able to escape the melting ray. He never suspected that his melting ray did work against Iron Man, but I wasn't really Iron Man this time. Unknown to anyone, I redesigned my armor, making it entirely out of tough extruded aluminum. So he switched the metal. Yeah, which again, that's a nice, simple, any 8-year-old kid can understand it solution. Well, now I got a big factory to run and weapons to produce for our defense. And so it ends with him going back to his life as Tony Stark. And he's got to deal with stepping up his production again to sort out the problems that the Melter caused. So that is the end of Tales of Suspense number 47. And again, I picked this one because in particular, the key panel in which he says, "No, I'm not helpless. I still have my brain," which is that's definitive for Tony Stark. When you put him in a situation where he doesn't have his armor, he is the the issues in his canon where he is deprived of his armor for some reason or another usually end up being among my favorites, because without his armor, he is forced to use his intelligence in order to get out of scraps, and I enjoy that immensely anytime he gets put into that position. So I chose this one too, as sort of like the early establishing issue that establishes that trope for Iron Man, and just to emphasize that that is something, again, that the new run is still missing. If we want to make this run the successful run it could possibly be, that it has the potential of being, that's one of the features of Iron Man that we need to bring in. Any other thoughts, number one Marmaduke fan?
A couple. One neat thing is maybe underscoring, like you were on a roll there when my mic was cutting out, but it's something that underscores how this is a good character issue for Iron Man, for Tony Stark, is that he fights a villain who is specifically built to kill Iron Man. And so for Iron Man to win, Tony Stark needs to contribute his brain to coming up with an intelligent solution to the problem. The second thing I wanted to underscore is kind of like the neat thing that Steve Ditko worked on this issue. I was actually thinking about how this parallels Doc Ock beating Spider-Man in one of his really early issues, where he basically tossed him around, pulled off his mask, slapped Peter Parker in the face, and threw him out the window. Steve Ditko had I like Steve Ditko, but he always had a stiff style. I think, like, really good at action scenes, really good at emotional drama, but kind of like little, I don't know, maybe like a little stick figure feeling to his characters. I felt like Don Heck really added something to this issue, where if you read How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, they'll talk about how the inker can make or break a comic. And I feel like Don Heck is just adding a little bit of ease or gracefulness to Ditko's pencils. So it's a really, really good combo. And it's one of the best examples I've seen of an inker, I don't know, adding something to a penciler's style. Like this, if you just compare this to Steve Ditko's Spider-Man work, this feels much less stiff than what he was doing for the early Spider-Man issues. Right.
Yep. So that is the art comment, which I rely on number one Marmaduke fan, the actual somewhat professional artist, to comment on that, because once again I'm at the pretty picture stage of art appreciation. So
it's exactly like the big brain memes, where like the low IQ is pretty pictures, and the mid-wit IQ is conceptual art, it's so intelligent, and the high IQ is pretty pictures.
Yeah, the question is what side of the bell curve am I on? I know I'm on one of the tails, but which tail is it?
Anything's better than mid-wit.
All right. Anything's better than
the next one is
Tales
of Suspense 56, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to pull that up now. Hopefully the spinning wheel of death won't last forever. Okay, so Tales of Suspense number 56 is, I believe this is the introduction of the Uncanny Unicorn, if I recall correctly. But it is also the introduction of another classic early Iron Man trope, and that is Iron Man having a tantrum in his private sanctum about something or other that has pissed him off, and basically wrecking the place. This is the first time, but it is certainly not the last time that this happens in Iron Man canon. And and essentially what he says he's upset about is, I'm sick of being Iron Man, sick of having to wear an electronic chest plate 24 hours a day, sick of living on borrowed time, never knowing which moment will be my last. So this is an issue where in which Stan Lee wants to emphasize the kind of tragic aspect of the character, the fact that he is trapped. He's trapped in an iron lung, essentially, and because he has to wear the iron lung 24 hours a day, there are many things that he used to enjoy that he can no longer do. he can't go swimming. He can't go swimming in a pool because that means he'd have to take his shirt off. He can't be intimate with women because then they would feel the chest plate and then discover who he is, who his other identity is. So we've made jokes in the past about him. He's a playboy, but he's a G-rated playboy because he can't actually have sex with any of the women that he's seeing right now. And it does really put a whole cramp into his style. So him, at this point, getting upset about that actually kind of makes sense.
I wondered if you knew anything about this, but when he has his double face palm, do you know if the double face palm is a reference to the first issue where he's trapped in the iron prison, or maybe that was just a coincidence? It definitely feels like
I don't know if it was deliberate, but it definitely feels like an echo for sure. Yeah. But what good does it do me to be the strongest man in the world? I can never relax, never be without my chest plate, never lead a normal life. So they're making explicit in that opening sequence that he has become one of the most powerful men in the world, but inside the armor, he is very, very vulnerable. And this is also not the first time that something like this has happened. So he's having a tantrum in the office and basically tearing the place apart. And then everyone outside is like, what the heck is going on? And there is, I forget which issue it is, but it's sometime in the 1970s. There's another issue in which basically this exact thing happens again, where he's in his office. He's just gotten off a phone call about a girl he used to see being in an insane asylum. And he basically has a tantrum right there where he's throwing things around the room and slamming the phone down because he basically blames himself for this woman's condition. So he's there pitching a fit in his office, and the exact same thing happens. Pepper and Happy are outside going, what the heck is going on in there? And Pepper again says, I don't know, hon, but I learned never to interrupt Tony when he's inside his private office. Like, it's literally the exact same thing. So, you better call him. So they call him, and he tells me, no, leave me alone. And double face palm. So that's the double face palm you were talking about.
Yep.
Nobody can help me. Yeah. I think, I don't know if it was deliberate or not. I think but it was. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a deliberate callback to the double face palm in Tales of Suspense 39. Because it is the same writer, so he probably is thinking, I got to get back to that tragic aspect, the fact that he's trapped now, kind of in this life, the fact that he's trapped in this iron lung and nobody can actually get him out of that situation. Nobody can help me. Nobody can ever know the torment felt by Iron Man. No, I must continue to live in a shadow world, spending half my days as the Golden Avenger and the other half as Anthony Stark, the envy of a million men, but one of the unhappiest humans alive. There's one panel in Tales of Suspense number 39 that basically says the same thing. He has it all, but he's destined to become one of the most tragic figures on Earth. So once again, this is Stan kind of emphasizing, here's my original intent for the character. He's a guy that was basically it's a character that basically takes all of the things that the basically left-leaning Marvel readers were likely to hate, the fact that he was rich, the fact that he was a defense contractor, and so on. This is the 1960s. Lefties didn't like defense contractors. He's basically a part of the military-industrial complex. Ooh, bad, bad. He can't possibly be a heroic character. And Stan Lee said, challenge accepted, essentially, and said, yes, let me make a hero out of a character like this that my readers aren't going to immediately take to. And so the entire point of the character is, this guy that you are primed, by your ideology and your politics to dislike. Nope, he has problems too. He may be one of the richest guys around, but he has problems too. And I am going to do whatever I can to make you like him and to make you acknowledge that he can be heroic. And that was the original intent of the character. I think some of the modern writers now have kind of twisted it a little bit and made it into basically Tony was an asshole before, and then he became Iron Man and gradually lifted himself from the asshole state. But in Stan Lee's conception, it was people were likely to take him for an asshole because of who he was and the position he had in society. But actually, this real guy, or this guy in reality, has all the makings of being a hero. Let me show you how, right? So it's a little bit different, I think, than a lot of the modern readers have interpreted it.
With the help of the MCU, which is a fun character, but it does, like, old Tony has a bit more gravitas to him, I think.
Yes, very much so. But I think the kind of corruption in how Tony is portrayed in the comics actually happened before the MCU. As a matter of fact, I think that the MCU, there's cross-pollination going on. I think that early, like right around the turn of the 21st century, we started to see a shift in how Tony was being portrayed, and we were starting to shift more towards the he was an asshole, he was a jerk before, and then he became Iron Man and gradually started to redeem himself. That happened actually before, some years before the MCU was a thing. And then I think the MCU, when they decided that they were going to do an Iron Man movie, they got influenced by those comics that were coming out at that time, which it would be right around the Civil War period, actually. If you think about, like, how long does it usually take a movie to get made? Count back a few years from 2008. Yeah. It was the Civil War Dark Reign period. So, so I think the MCU was influenced by that. And then what happened is, once the MCU started to become popular, then the MCU kind of started affecting the comics. So it went both ways. Yeah. But the upshot of all of this is that the Iron Man that I grew to love from the Silver and Bronze Age is, as you say, a character that had a lot more complexity to him, and, as you say, a lot more gravitas. And he wasn't just straight up arrogant. He was in fact a team player most of the time. He was in fact willing to acknowledge faults in himself, which is not to say that the better modern comics don't bring that stuff in. Like we've talked in other streams before about debates that we've had with other people about whether or not Civil War was good. And as I've said in the past, I fall on the side of some of it was good. It depends on which issues you're reading. And the Iron Man comics that came after Civil War, when he was director of S.H.I.E.L.D., I think the writers there actually did a fairly good job, given what they were handed with, what they were asked to do in order to fit into this event. And you see in there a lot of, if you read the Iron Man comics, you see a lot of self-criticism and depression and, oh God, what the hell am I doing? This is terrible. He's, hallucinating his dead friends, and there's a lot of crying in that period too. So it's so sometimes the modern comics do get it right, but definitely the earlier comics established a character who wasn't just a simple avatar of arrogance. He was a lot more than that.
It's interesting how the issues we've read so far, all of them have had like a moment emphasizing Tony's humanity or Tony's problems, but it still felt like Stan felt like we need to have a special issue where we make that a central point of the issue, is how tortured he is. Like, maybe it has something just to do with Stan's writing style, where after a little while he wants to change it up or re-emphasize the emotional side of the character again. Like, it's always cranked up to 11 with Stan, where if we're going to do an emotional drama issue for Tony, that emotional drama is going to be the point of the entire issue, essentially.
Right. It's like Stan Lee writes comic issues the way I tell my kids to write paragraphs. Each paragraph should have one central idea that you focus on for the entire paragraph. So Stan Lee says, okay, in this issue, this is the central idea I'm going to focus on. So, and that kind of style sort of keeps things simple. Keeps things simple for the reading audience, who, I mean, in this time, they were still pretty much assuming that it was going to be 12-year-old boys in the drugstore reading these. So you got to make it simple enough for a 12-year-old boy to understand.
It's also interesting that the supervillain has like 6 different powers. So unlike the Melter, who has like one central superpower, he can melt iron. Unicorn is basically like he has a wider toolkit to make him a dangerous enemy, but he doesn't push Tony in quite the same way. For Tony, like, his main problem is basically just taking one night off. He takes one night off on the night when a new supervillain decides to attack. And he's already feeling stressed about being Iron Man and Tony Stark, but what I think brings him back is the realization that Happy Hogan and Pepper Potts are affected by his decisions too. So if he does care about them, then he has a duty to keep doing the right thing. He can't quit doing the right thing just so he can relax and hang out with Pepper Potts all day.
Ladies, yeah. So we have here, I'm through being Iron Man. He basically, I'm going to take a vacation, essentially, which is it's another it's a motif that repeats too in the early canon, that sometimes someone will just get tired of being Iron Man and decide to quit for a bit, and then inevitably something will happen to somebody he cares about that will pull him right back in. So this is the first instance of that motif. So I'm taking a night off. I want my little black book. I'm gonna get my new Jag, and I'm gonna go out and see the ladies. Bye. Like,
underscores it by telling Happy he doesn't need him. Poor Happy Hogan. Not so happy.
Yeah. So he's being kind of a jerk here, but this is interesting because Pepper's like, what's come over him? He's never acted this way or spoken to us this way before. So once again, like, Tony being a jerk, according to this panel, is not his natural set point. It's something that happens to him when he is stressed. So he misses an Avengers call while he's on this little vacation here, which actually comes to bite him in a related Avengers issue in the same time period, if I recall correctly. I've read there's an early Avengers issue that basically addresses what happened here. They tried to call him and he didn't show up, so then he got called to the carpet for it in the Avengers mag for not showing up. But so then the Unicorn shows up here. And Oh yeah, this is great too. Meantime, at one of the East Side swankiest supper clubs, Tony, darling, where have you been all these months? So he's out with a girl, and he says, "Dreaming of you, Pep. I mean, Pamela."
Da, 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 da.
Da, 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 da. Yeah. So, he's totally into Pepper, but he's not acting on it. Because he feels like he really can't commit to anybody.
Yeah.
That's one of the continuing motifs of Tales of Suspense. I can't ask any woman to fall in love with me, not when I could die at any second. That's literally what he says, like 1,000 times in issue. I'm exaggerating, but he says it a lot. All right, so the unicorn is at the Stark complex here. So he attacks the factory while Tony is away on his mini vacation. And basically what happens is Happy jumps into the breach to attack the unicorn, and he gets critically injured. And so he gets critically injured here. So they have to call the ambulance for him. And eventually Tony hears about it. And then he realizes, Happy in the hospital? Yeah. I bet, yeah. So it's like, oh no, I have to rush and help them, because Pepper was also kidnapped by the unicorn. Yeah, I'm trying to get to that panel that I made the thumbnail. Yeah. So even as the lovely loyal secretary speaks, the man she is quoting is filled with new need me, I pray there's still time. So the reason, the kind of ulterior motive here I had in choosing this issue to look at in this stream is to highlight the aspect of self-criticism in Tony. The fact that he can do things that are stupid or self-destructive or harmful or wrong, but when he does, he recognizes it and he calls himself to the carpet for it. There's no one who criticizes Tony Stark better than Tony Stark himself does. Actually, he will often blame himself for things that aren't really his fault. He will often, if someone gets hurt in his vicinity because a villain has attacked him because he's Iron Man, he will think to himself, well, that person got hurt because of me, because I'm Iron Man, it's all my fault. Well, obviously, in that kind of a situation, it really isn't your fault. It's not your fault that a villain decided to attack you. That's the villain's fault. But in this case, he was kind of joyriding when he should have been paying more attention. So, and he calls himself to the carpet for that as well. So now he's got this motivation to go back to being Iron Man so that he can rescue his friends that have now been put in harm's way. And he is able to rescue Pepper. I'll return and finish him off as soon as I know you're out of harm's way. Mr. Stark owes you so much, and so do I, and so many people. Why won't you reveal who you really are? So we have the fight with the unicorn.
There's a nice theme that he doesn't know the unicorn's powers, which lets the unicorn keep getting the drop on him. They're like two separate instances where he doesn't know the unicorn can fly, and so because of that, the unicorn's able to sneak up on him or get away.
Right. And then we have the ticking clock. That's always a classic in these kind of action sequences. The unicorn basically sets a bomb in the factory, and he's got 15 minutes to figure out where the bomb is so it can be defused. Yeah. So we have his force bolt. I couldn't outspeed it. Oh yeah, and this one you tweeted, back you capitalist fool. Tony Stark is a capitalist fool. Yeah. So that's great. Unless I can find that bomb, I'm fighting a losing battle. I can't let my factory be destroyed. Tick, tick. So we have the nice ticking clock motif. There's no telling how powerful his force bolt is. So yeah, as you're saying, he doesn't really have an idea of what the unicorn's power set is. So yeah, as you say, the unicorn keeps getting the drop on him. His power is too nearly the equal of mine. I got to find a different way to fight him. Tick, tick. I love the sound effect here to emphasize. Oh, the time's getting closer. You know. So I'll try to stay out of his way long enough to cover the entire factory. Perhaps my sonar transistors turned to full intensity can detect the ticking of his hidden bomb.
It's a nice touch that Tony's safe in his armor, presumably from the bomb, but Pepper isn't. So in an issue that's about Tony being selfish, the villain beats Tony by exploiting the weakness of other people that he cares about.
Right, exactly. Which is kind of the what keeps him here to begin with. So yeah, and so because the unicorn the unicorn is about to blow up the factory with his hidden bomb, and Tony knows that if the bomb goes off, basically all the fleshy people inside are going to be incinerated, including people that he cares about. So he decides to surrender to the unicorn, but he ends up faking him out. So, all right, he allows Unicorn to take him to this plane to take him back to his masters.
I'm a man of my words, so we'll get on the plane to the end curtain. But I didn't say what I do once I got.
So he does. Yeah, he sea lawyers it. Yes, I promised that I would get on a plane with you, but I didn't promise that I would do the entire flight with you. I just promised I would get on the plane. I did not say what I was going to do afterwards. Yeah. So it was a classic sea lawyer moment, but I didn't say what I do after I entered the plane. And he basically bursts out of a window, depressurizes the plane, basically wrecks the plane.
Has a lot of fun doing it too.
Yeah. He's like, oh, darn me and my silly temper, right? I didn't see the unicorn. Yeah. So yeah, this is what you're talking about. He doesn't know the unicorn can fly. So as long as he still doesn't suspect that I too can fly, I can still escape. Yeah. So the unicorn escapes, and then we end with Tony coming back as Tony, asking what has happened to Happy. Is he all right? And we hear from the hospital that Happy has basically come out of his critical condition. And they go to see him. And again, we have the sort of
the corny gag at the end with Happy in the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also kind of ending with Happy in the hospital. Doesn't know if she's teasing him because she likes him or if she's being cold because she doesn't like him. So romantic tension.
Right. Yeah, I can never be sure. Is Pepper nice to Happy to make me jealous, or is he really the one? Yeah. And then perhaps it's better that Pepper does prefer Happy. I realize now I could never lead a normal life. So we go back to what I was saying before, that he always says, I can't ask a woman to be in a relationship with me because I could die at any second. My life is a life of constant danger. So like he's really, really into Pepper in this period, but he's not going to allow himself to pursue Pepper. He's going to basically kind of manipulate things so that Pepper and Happy get together. Because in his opinion, it's better that Pepper does prefer Happy, because Happy is just a normal guy. and with Happy, she won't have to face any of the possible dangers that she would have to face if she were with him. So, yeah, so it ends on that note. I can never lead a normal life. The end. There are a lot of issues that end kind of in this way, in which you have this panel where after all the action is done and we're at the denouement, Tony, of course, has an obligatory moment where he reflects on how terribly lonely his life has to be because he is Iron Man. So this is a good exemplar of that trope right there. All right, so any final thoughts?
A couple really strong issues. It's also interesting how in this jump we saw like the jump to the brand new red and gold armor. We see Stan Lee, I think, kind of deliberately trying to get back to basics. Well, that was actually the theme of New Iron Man, is they wanted to get back to basics. But we see Stan Lee kind of saying, okay, what's the central premise of this character? Let's re-emphasize the central premise of this character.
Right.
And there's even kind of like a contrast between the two, where the Melter was all about the Melter's melting powers, and the Unicorn was more about just a physical threat to Tony as he's going through an internal struggle. So it's sort of like Stan Lee is developing not just like new characters and powers for these guys, but he's aware of how to maybe like to build the tension of the thing, where if the first tension is the tragedy of being trapped in an iron prison, the second tension is the man being worn down by the tragedy of being trapped in his iron prison and having to cope with that. So
right. Yes, so those were two exemplar issues from the Tales of Suspense run. Let me see what we have in the chat here. Echo, Irony. Commicorn. Yeah, Unicorn is a Commicorn, yeah. Happy got wrecked. BTFO'd. Yep. Okay, so I think we have reached the end of our stream for this week. Anything that you would like to advertise or plug, number one Marmaduke fan, as my guest?
Let's see. My comic is Jane Smith, Wannabe Gladiator, free to read on Webtoons. On my channel, I'm working my way through Chrono Trigger and some dramatic Luke, I am your father dramatic moments are happening in Chrono Trigger, so I'm really digging that. Comic reviews are now on Mondays and Wednesdays on my channel. It's Manga Monday and Western Wednesday for comic reviews.
Western Wednesday. Yep. And I actually write I write comic reviews for a fanzine that is associated with the N3F, that's the national. Let me just look up the real name of it. But I actually write comic reviews for. Hey, don't do that. Sorry, the cat is being a cat. All right, the National Fantasy Fan Federation, or N3F. That federation, if you join, you will get a lot of free fanzines, and one of them is called Tight Beam. And for that fanzine, I do the Western Comics capsule reviews under my real name. So I do want to advertise that organization, which I really like because it is deliberately apolitical. The president of the federation has made it his intention to keep it apolitical. So if you're kind of tired of, fan groups that have become gradually, overwhelmed by the SJW left, the N3F is apolitical and welcomes everybody. So let me actually share the screen so you can see the website here. So I do short reviews for them. So there you go, the National Fantasy Fan Federation. Definitely recommend that. Yeah. They do basically anything. Yeah, they basically do anything Fanish. They've done. Tight Beam also has a manga column as well. So and lots of book reviews too for science fiction and fantasy books. So here we have the fanzines, Eldritch Science, Films Fantastic, Ionosphere, Mangaverse. So they have a whole zine devoted to manga. Nappa, N3F review of books, Origin, and then Type Beam. That's the one that I work for. So definitely recommend that for sure. Okay. Well, it's good. It's good that we had a couple of eyes on this stream tonight. But if you're watching this later, I also am happy that you are watching this later. Thank you for listening, either live or later on. And I hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody. It was a blast.